thank y'all so much for being here tonight, joining us for this presentation. Let me introduce our speakers to you tonight. We have Elinés Negron and Yamuna Teeter from the Children's Advocacy Center from for North Texas. Elinés is the high-risk youth coordinator. She is and the care coordinator for Denton County. Elinés has 6 years of experience working in the field of child abuse and human trafficking and has been with the Advocacy Center since February of 2019. During her tenure at the Advocacy Center, Elinés has conducted over 900 forensic interviews of children for law enforcement and child protective service investigations. Prior to transitioning into the role of high-risk youth coordinator at the Advocacy Center, Elinés served as a bilingual forensic interviewer at Children's Advocacy Center for North Texas and Grayson County Children's Advocacy Center. Elinés is a certified sexual assault advocate and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology. Elinés enjoys spending time with her fiance and their toddler, doing outdoor activities and going to the zoo. And Yamuna Teeter is the Assistant Director of Education for Children's Advocacy Center for North Texas. Yamuna has 10 years of experience working in the field of parent education and has been with the Advocacy Center since January of 2019. During her tenure at the Advocacy Center, Yamuna has educated over 15,000 children on body and internet safety and regularly trains adults on how to recognize and report child abuse. Prior to joining the Advocacy Center, Yamuna served as a family support coach with healthy outcomes through prevention and early support, early intervention specialist with early childhood intervention, and campus administrator for Denton State Supported Living Center. Yamuna is a certified family life educator and holds a Master of Science degree in educational psychology, as well as a Bachelor of Science degree in human development and family studies from the University of North Texas. Yamuna enjoys spending time with her children, Karina, Harrison, Emily, and Natalie. So thank y'all so much for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to our speakers.
Thank you so much for having us. Elinés and I are really excited tonight to meet with all of you, even if it is just virtually, to talk about just a super important subject, human trafficking. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it. If technology is a little bit wacky, that's okay. We'll move on. We will make sure if there's any technology hiccups to get you all the information that you might need from tonight if there's a glitch or something. So I always like to start trainings with this slide and really talk about the impact that professional reporters have when it comes to the lives of children. Many of you tonight are teachers. Thank you for all that you do, especially over the past few years. In comparison to some of you maybe are longtime teachers, but the past few years definitely have been a different climate and very trying, not just for teachers, but for students alike. What we look at here, so I want you to follow along with me. When we look kind of at these colors on the screen, you can see 2019, or it's the green kind of line that goes across your screen, okay? The blue line is 2020. That's really interesting. It's kind of doing a little something here or there on the screen. There's quite a big dip right around March. Oh my goodness, we'll revisit that. Then in 2021, last year, wow, that looks quite different too. By contrast, there's like quite a large spike and, you know, a little dip. But when we compare it back to that 2019 and 2020, we can see significant differences. These are reports that met our criteria at the Children's Advocacy Center for North Texas. Of course, at our center, we see really the felony level offenses of child abuse, kind of the worst of the worst that you might be able to imagine. And so what we also see is those reports come in, and 81% of the reports that came in, they were done by professional reporters. So those are people licensed by the state or certified by the state that come in contact with children every single day, like many of you here tonight, or maybe the parents that are joining us, maybe in their outside professions as well. But I really do want to revisit that blue line in 2020, kind of what that meant. We saw that reports were quite a bit down. There was such a dip there when the beginning of that, the world was changed. Students were out of school. They were maybe away from those safe adults that they normally would have reported to if they needed to report to a safe adult. They also may have been at home where their abuser might have been present in the home. So what we saw is when students went back to school in the fall, even if it was maybe at first virtually and things like that, we saw those reports kind of go back up. We generally see those reports go back up anyway when school starts back up, but you can look at 2020 or 2021. We look at that orange and we see it was a record-breaking year for our center. This is not the kind of record that is a great one to break. So I just want to kind of put that before we start the presentation tonight, how really important it is for you to be here tonight for these 2 hours. We'll try to get you out early because that's always great, but we will have time for questions at the end. And I hope after watching the whole presentation that you do have questions, but you also have a lot of takeaways. So we will see if the video cooperates. Ness, if you'll just give me a head shake if it does not, and we will make sure to get this out to you. This is a beautiful video. It's a TBRI video on human trafficking. Let's see if the volume works. Y'all, it's so good though. So we will make sure to get you that link. Many of you might have already seen it, but it is just a great way to start. So let's talk about our learning objectives. That's what we are here for tonight. Okay, so I kept them kind of simple and they're broad, but I want you to have these takeaways. Increase knowledge of vulnerabilities associated with human trafficking victims. Second one, identify traffickers' role in life of a child sex trafficking victim. Finally, we'll switch gears a little bit and we'll learn how to recognize how current trends in technology and social media impact youth. So a little bit of like Internet Safety 101 there. So it's also important to remember that research indicates that in the United States alone, 1 in 10 children will be victims of child sexual abuse before they turn 18 years of age. So many of these children maybe have not even graduated high school, but they've already experienced this. 1 in 10 of those kids will tell that they've ever been abused. So that means, right, that 9 of those children are not telling. What this looks like, our agency serves 3 counties now, Denton County, where we are tonight, virtually of course, Wise County, and Jack County. Let's look at Denton County for a minute. In Denton County, we have 200,000 children that reside in our county alone. It's actually a little bit more than that. That means 20,000 children will be victims of child sexual abuse before they reach adulthood, but only 2,000 children will tell. For those 2,000 children, there might be services right at our center. There's a case that is open, it's being investigated. They have lots of resources. There's therapy at our center. There's resources for the family. There's education, not just for the child, but for the parent. There's a lot of healing that can happen by having access to this. There's also that critical piece of justice. There's that opportunity, at least for justice, when there is an open investigation, there's a case that actually happens. But for those children that never tell, or it's never reported, what happens? They become adults. There's lots of different health outcomes that can be associated with that later in life, but it's also just kind of the notion of, were they ever seen? Were they ever heard? Was there healing that occurred after this happened to them? We also really need to keep in mind that 98% of the children that reported abuse said it was by someone that they knew and trusted. Okay, so this was when I speak to schools, and I speak to a lot of them, students of all ages, we start bringing this discussion up in middle school. We always focus on who a safe person is. They have definitely names for that. But when I ask them, who do you think some of the names, like the titles that child might name if they are in our center? All the students participate. They're able to say names like dad, stepdad, grandpa, friend, neighbor, best friend's parent, mom or dad, extended family member, someone I met online. They have coach, teacher. They say these names, and I tell them every time, you're spot on. That's absolutely correct. We spend some time talking about that. that it can be anyone that is known and trusted to the child is also the person that can be the abuser. So we need to keep that in mind throughout that this presentation tonight. Just thinking of sometimes it's the people you trust the most are the ones that do abuse that child. So let's get some myths kind of out of the way before we get into some of the really nitty gritty of it all, right? So this is some really great information, actually from a survivor herself. This is the Rebecca Bender Initiative. She is a survivor of sex trafficking. So myth number one, most trafficking victims are kidnapped and held captive. Thank you, Netflix. I always show this to high schoolers, and we talk about kind of dispelling those myths, right? No, reality is most victims, they're trafficked by someone that's likely known to them, that they trust them, right? They're also kind of held by a way of psychological means. It's not so much that they are, behind bars, held captive, but instead it's like their mind and their body are really held there. And there's a lot of barriers for them to disclose. And do they ever even feel safe to disclose? So myth number two, trafficking requires a sex act. So human trafficking, you'll see a lot of different definitions out there. You may even see a few tonight that are summarized. Sex trafficking, yes, requires a sex act, but we'll even get into more specific on that. But labor trafficking does not, right? So that's that forced labor that someone might have to do. You work this off for 6, 7 months, 6 years, whatever it is. And that is, of course, labor trafficking. Myth number three, trafficking only happens to kids overseas. Doesn't happen here. Not true. So there have been reported cases in every state in the United States. Also, something really important to keep in mind that 83% of trafficked persons were identified as U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens. So sometimes when I talk to high schoolers or to parent groups, this kind of comes as a surprise. And I think it is, right? Some of that's like kind of perpetuated, right? In those different movies online where it's kind of just shown very different than what the realities are. But no, 83% of trafficked persons were identified as US citizens. High number of trafficked children, they've already experienced kind of other systems before. So that could be repeated foster and welfare systems, and also traffickers, they exploit the vulnerable. Other on-ramps can include things like homelessness, mental health deficits, living as a runaway. Ellie Ness is going to talk quite a bit on that a little bit later, but also, right, witnessing violence in the home, that domestic violence in the home, bullying that might be happening in schools, racial inequalities, poverty, it does come back again to those vulnerabilities. Traffickers play on that. Myth number four, but don't some girls want to be there? I've literally been asked this question. I was at a school all last week, so about 2,000 students through the course of an entire week. It was a great week, lots of wonderful questions. I shared with the students when we went over the slide, I said the last time I was at this school in 2019, right before the pandemic, I was literally asked this question. Don't some girls like that life? They like that life. They're working. That's what they want to do. I said, let's think about that, right? We have to remember, if a child is groomed into this life, they go in as a child. Trafficked children become trafficked adults. There's not a whole lot of realistic, healthy options that they may have to them at that time, right? Maybe they were homeless. Maybe they had lots of external needs that were not being met. I also always ask, it's not so much like on the runaway side of things. It's not really, okay, they ran away. My question is, what were they running from to begin with? Maybe there was dysfunction in the home. Maybe there was that domestic violence. Maybe they were being sexually abused in the home and they ran away. So these are just kind of some myths we want to get out of the way, kind of put those to the side. Some statistics in the state of Texas. Again, I'm going to keep it relevant. We are here. I want you to think this is really like the tip of the iceberg. They're just some facts that are there for you to just warming you up, getting you ready to digest a lot of deeper information. So 93% of trafficked teens, they have already been sexually abused. This does not mean that if a child is sexually abused that they will be trafficked. But it does mean, right, when these children are rescued or these adults are rescued, they were in that life as a child, they were trafficked, they do self-disclose that they had already been a victim, right, of child sexual abuse, or it's somewhere, maybe there was a report of abuse that was already generated, and it was there. So that's something really important to keep in mind. That can be another barrier to leaving, those psychological kind of things at play there. There are 400 trafficked teens on the street each night in DFW Metroplex. Now, I don't see a total tally account of how many people are in this training tonight, but sometimes when I'm at a school, the entire day, I might see like 400 students throughout like 8 periods or something. So when I talk to students about that, I'm like, that's as many children as I see today on this very day. So if we have 200 people in this training tonight, double that. 400 children on the street each night in the DFW Metroplex. This may be a little bit different than your idea of like walking the street. We'll really get into that quite a bit more in all the different ways that children are trafficked, especially online means. But just keep that in mind. Double the number of attendees tonight. These are real children. It's not just a number on a screen. The average age of the American girl enters the sex trade is 15 years old. So maybe that sophomore, right, in high school, sometimes younger. We know younger children are absolutely targeted. So this is an average age. A few years ago, the average age was popping up in the research as 13 years of age. So really you're thinking about that, that eighth grader, seventh, eighth grade, and just kind of how different children change in 2 years. It's quite significant development-wise. So of course it makes sense going after that younger child to kind of lure them into that life. Also, there's 79,000 minor victims of child sex trafficking in the state of Texas. So these are all huge numbers. Again, there's real people, real children really attached to this. And so I just wanted you to have that information just kind of early on. I'm going to hand things over to Ellie Ness. Ellie Ness, I will switch the screen whenever you want me to. You can just give me a cue.
All right, go ahead.
Okay.
All right. So let's start getting into what human trafficking is. But before that, I do want to point out that Yamuna pointed a lot of stats out for you guys. And if you really think of the fact that human trafficking is an underreported situation, just imagine what that number would really be if we had a real count of how many victims are out there. So that's just something that I want you guys to think about. So trafficking has been around for a very long time, but it wasn't until 2000 that something that's called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act came into play. And this helped trafficking become a crime. And so not only did this establish being able to prosecute traffickers, this also puts prevention into play for human trafficking. And along with putting protective measures for victims and survivors of human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the unlawful act of transporting or coercing people in order to benefit from their work or service, typically in the form of forced labor or sexual acts. Now, in order for a crime to meet the elements of human trafficking, there has to be a couple different components. And one of those, for anybody who's over the age of 18, is going to be that force, that fraud, and that coercion. So that needs to be present in order for it to meet the elements of human trafficking. If not, then it's considered exploitation. There also needs to be that exchange. And so that's either money or something of value. Then that can be clothes, shelter, food, anything that's valuable to that person. And so those are the elements that need to be there in order for it to meet what's considered human trafficking. And if it doesn't meet the element of human trafficking, it's something that would be considered either sexual abuse or sexual assault, which is still a crime. Something that I do want to point out, often people tend to use the term prostitution when it comes to children who are in the life. But something to consider is that anybody under the age of 18 who is having sex for money or for something of value is considered a victim. All right, so let's get in a little bit into what force, fraud, and coercion are. Some examples: force, that would be a person being kidnapped and they get beaten until they continue to earn money. And sometimes that looks like someone being put out on the track to make that money for that day, and they come home and they haven't made that money. And so that trafficker is going to beat them and it's going to put them back into the streets with the notion of you're not coming home until that you've met your quota. And so that's that force aspect of it. And so now we move to the fraud. And so the fraud is people being tricked into believing something that their trafficker says. And we'll get into this a little bit later in the presentation, but that's going to look like love. And so often traffickers will utilize that phrase of, if you love me, you'll do this for me. And because victims have been groomed and have been put into this codependent relationship, that's something that they can easily use. That other aspect of it is going to be that coercion piece. And so those are often threats that are made. An example is a young lady who meets somebody over the internet and she feels comfortable with him and she thinks that this person is their age, and then they're sending nudes. And so then that person will take that nude and blackmail that child into trafficking and say things like, if you don't do this, I'm going to show this to your pastor if they're a churchgoer, or I'll send this to your friends, to your family. And often kids feel that shame and that embarrassment, and that's something that they don't want seen. And so that's definitely a way to coerce kids into human trafficking. All right, so let's talk a little bit about something of value. Oftentimes people will think of something of value and they just think money, and that's what the exchange is. But oftentimes it can be money, it can be shelter, rides, just safety, it could be meals, and a lot of the times it's also drugs. So when either somebody has already had that drug dependency, traffickers will exploit that. And there's times also where traffickers will get these victims drugged up so that it becomes a dependency, and so they continue in the life because they've already built that addiction. But really, I want you to think about the fact that all kids are different, all individuals are different, and so don't limit your definition of what valuables are, because value can be different for each and every child. All right, so let's talk about child sex trafficking. So child sex trafficking is different than what human trafficking is for anybody over the age of 18. And so when we talk about child sex trafficking, we're talking about anybody under the age of 18. And so in order for it to be considered child sex trafficking, it occurs when a person knowingly traffics a child under the age of 18 with the intent that the trafficked child engage in forced labor services. They receive a benefit from participating in a venture that involves an activity described in the penal code, and that's including by receiving labor services the person knows are forced labor services. So if you tune into that, that's not just people who are selling, but the people who are buying the service. Also traffics a child and by any means causes the trafficked child to engage in or become the victim of things that are prohibited in the Texas Penal Code. And that can be aggravated sexual assault, that can be pornography, all those different things. And something that I also want to point out, if you see the highlighted piece, it says that the trafficker does not have to know that the child is under 18. So let's say that child meets this person and says, oh yeah, I'm 18 years old, and then this person goes on to trafficking them. Later on, they can't say, well, I didn't know she was 18, because that's not a factor, and that's not going to come into play when it comes to time of prosecution. I think also what's really great about the child sex trafficking is that for child sex trafficking, it's different from adult sex trafficking because that force, fraud, or coercion aspect does not need to be there, just that exchange factor. And so that's pretty great when it comes to children, being able to eliminate that force, fraud, or coercion piece. So again, keep in mind with child sex trafficking, anyone who recruits, harbors, transports, or attains a victim is a sex trafficker, but also anyone who sells or buys underage sex is a sex trafficker. And so when it comes to child sex trafficking, there doesn't need to be a third person involved for it to meet the elements of child sex trafficking. And so that's, Sophie meets somebody on the internet and this person, and they meet up and they offer her a cheeseburger from McDonald's for, a sex act. There doesn't need to be that third person who's selling Sophie, but because this person is exchanging sex for something of value, that person is also considered a sex trafficker. All right. So a couple more facts about child sex trafficking. We know that it's the exchanging of something of value for sex with a child or minor. Something really important that victims don't often recognize that they're being trafficked. And so there's times where there's kids that roll through our center and we have high suspicions, but this child is not identifying as somebody who's being trafficked. And when they're in therapy, they start to realize like, oh, okay, so that's something that was happening to me. And they were not aware that it was going on because traffickers use such grooming tactics that they make kids think that this is normal behavior and that this is a normal way of living life. It can happen to anyone, regardless of your age, culture, gender, or neighborhood. There are some vulnerabilities that come into play that make some more likely to be trafficked, but really it can happen to anyone. And something that's also a misrepresentation is often people think that child sex trafficking only happens to girls. But in 2020, boys made up 7% of child trafficking victims. And again, when we think about how child sex trafficking is underreported, imagine what that number would be, not just of girls, but of boys as well. All right. So I want to make sure that there's no confusion in what the differences are between abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. And so this is a cool example of each one just to better understand. And so abuse is, when Sophie is molested by her father. Exploitation would be, Sophie befriends a man online and then she sends him nudes. And then trafficking is when Sophie's new boyfriend arranges dates with other men where Sophie is sexually abused in exchange for money. And so again, with that trafficking aspect, that exchange is going to be there. All right, so some vulnerabilities in trafficking. That's going to be people of color, indigenous communities, immigrants, LGBTQ plus community. And something to think about also is that individuals in the LGBTQ community are 5 times more likely to be trafficked versus their heterosexual counterparts. And this oftentimes is because that shame that's still going on, that parents are not accepting and they kick that child out, and so that child now has nowhere to go. And so that increases, the chances of them getting trafficked. And also that feeling of abandonment where you don't have a support system and you feel like you don't have a support system. Well, traffickers will exploit that and use that as like, I understand you and I support you. And that's a really big way of leading kids into trafficking as well. And so it's also that discrimination, racism, family dysfunctions, unstable housing. Again, whether, parents have kicked the child out of the house or the child has run away, that's definitely going to increase the chances of them being trafficked. Poverty, like Yamuna mentioned earlier, history of abuse and trauma it's a big predictor of trafficking. And then again, addiction. All right, so let's talk about some warning signs that you as teachers and parents will see in these kiddos. So these are some red flags, but some physical warning signs are going to be burn marks, bruises, or cuts. And that can be violence from either the trafficker or that can be violence from the John themselves, who is the buyer. Sudden change in appearance is also one. Inappropriately dressed. And when we refer to inappropriately dressed, we're not talking about the girl in the shorts or the crop top. Oftentimes, we're also talking about the kids that in summertime are wearing a big black hoodie to potentially cover up any marks, bruises, or tattoos or branding that those traffickers may leave on their bodies. So it's not a form of somebody kind of being triggered to ask what's going on. And so oftentimes it's going to be those kids where you see them wearing clothes that are not necessarily appropriate for the weather. So it's going to be that. That sudden possession of expensive clothing, purses, or electronics. That's a big one as well. Those multiple cell phones, when kids have multiple cell phones. New or unusual tattoos. Traffickers often not only brand kids, but will offer tattoos up to them. So that's also one that we see here at our center. Kids that appear to be hungry, malnourished, or in need of medical care. That's also a way where traffickers, will manipulate children and will keep things, because just as easy as a trafficker can give something to a child, they can also take it away. Loss or lack of school ID, loss or lack of state issued ID, like a driver's license. And another one is those sexually transmitted diseases or infections, especially when they're repeatedly going to the doctor's office to treat sexually transmitted diseases. That's also going to be an indicator as well. All right, so some behavioral warning signs that you'll also see, and that's going to be that sudden academic decline. Kids' grades are just dropping. And also something to consider, because a kid's getting good grades doesn't mean that there's not potential trafficking. There are kids who live normal lives. They go home, sneak out at night, and get trafficked, and they're keeping up with everything. But oftentimes you will see that sudden academic decline. A lot of those unexplained absences, they tend to have a boyfriend who's older, and oftentimes that boyfriend, that you'll see that kiddo, being very silent around that boyfriend. That boyfriend tends to do all the talking for them. They talk about going to clubs, bars, and adult parties. They also invite others to partake in that lifestyle and those experiences. They brag about the money that they're making, or just having lots of money. Sometimes they can be withdrawn, depressed, distracted, or just checked out. Again, they're repeatedly running away from home. Has, attempted suicide, is affiliated with a gang, and they use sex trafficking terminology. Well, we'll look at that in a little bit, some of those common terms that are utilized as well. All right, so two of the biggest predictors of child sex trafficking is going to, like we mentioned earlier, it's going to be that prior sexual abuse history. And so in Denton County, we conduct approximately over 1,000 interviews, and annually 90% of those are going to be those sexual abuse cases. And so oftentimes we see those sexual abuse cases. And so forensic interviews, those are conversations that professionals have with children anytime that there's a CPS report that's made that meets their criteria, or a law enforcement investigation starts. That first piece that's going to get that investigation started is going to be that forensic interview. And that's that neutral conversation that these kids have with that professional to move forward with that investigation. And so another indicator, like we mentioned time and time again, is going to be that runaway. And it's very interesting because 1 out of 3 runaways will be lured within those first 48 hours. And so that's a scary thought to think about when kids go missing. Just to think about the fact that in those 48 hours, that trafficker's potentially already approaching that child. All right, so where do traffickers find their victims? What if I told you that it happens in your home? That's not a concept that most people think about. And if they think about it, they may think of it as, a spouse who's trafficking or a parent who's trafficking. But it's also that social media aspect that's going on in your house while maybe you're cooking dinner or you're relaxing, watching TV, and your child's in their bedroom. They take a break from studying and they get on social media, and, someone named Susie has gone on their Instagram page and has started to like their photos. And so your child's going to be like, oh, who's this person? They're going to go onto their Instagram page, and this person's going to paint that lifestyle of glamorous and so much fun, and this is what you want. And then your child will start to like their photos, and that person is going to use that as a method of beginning that conversation with your child. And they're going to start to introduce them and groom them into thinking that this is the best lifestyle. If you're missing this, you can have this. Just come hang out with me. And that's how the trafficking starts. And it's also that's really the bottom girls that traffickers utilize to recruit other women or other girls. Um, but it's also that trafficker themselves, right? They write to your child on Instagram or Snapchat and say, "Oh, I really love your pictures. You're really cute," and they get that conversation started. And so, Yamuna is going to touch more on that safety with technology, but that's definitely something to consider when it comes to trafficking. Social media is a really big one. It also happens at parties. Kids are approached at parties, at the mall. It could be that, you drop off your kid at the mall not thinking that anything is going to happen and they're hanging out with their friends and somebody approaches them and they feel safe because they're in a public place. And that's when, again, they exchange numbers and that grooming begins. And it happens in our schools. And oftentimes it's that girl that's been recruited to recruit. And so it's that girl who, picks and chooses right from your classrooms who they're going to victimize and who they're going to bring onto the lifestyle. And so not only is it adults, but it's also children who are recruiting other children. And so that's, again, something to think about. All right, so how do traffickers operate? In many cases, like Yamuna mentioned, the victims know, love, and trust their traffickers. Traffickers will identify the needs of the victim and they're going to meet those needs by finding the solutions. And so that's probably looking like, Sophie got into a fight with her mom, and so Sophie leaves to go to the park, and this neighbor who's a potential trafficker knows that Sophie's having problems with her mom, and he's going to be that support system for her, and he's going to make her feel safe and supported, and that's how, he's going to find a solution, and that's how it starts. Traffickers offer job opportunities, safety, stability, love, drugs, and a sense of belonging. And traffickers, like I mentioned earlier, they can give it and they can so easily just take it away. And then that child is just stuck in that lifestyle, not getting what they thought they were going to get and they were manipulated into. All right, so 90% of victims have a trafficker. That's a very big number to think about, especially when people tend to have the idea of girls wanting to be in that lifestyle. And so when we think about 90%, that's a really big number. So now we're going to get into the different types of traffickers. We have what's called our guerrilla traffickers, and their characteristics are violence. They're more likely to kidnap and sexually assault the victims themselves before putting them out on the streets. And their methods of control are force, violence, and terror. And they oftentimes will threaten the victim or the victim's family. And so that kid definitely feels like they're trapped and they have no way out. All right, so our most common type of trafficker is what we refer to as a Romeo trafficker. And their characteristics are that suave, that guy who smiles and looks good and makes his lifestyle look fun, and he's super inviting and comments them and makes them feel all the ways that young girls want to feel. And their methods of control are tricking the victim into falling in love. They build a codependent relationship with the victim. And then once they have that victim, and right, if that child realizes like, oh, this is not what I wanted, they can so easily turn into that guerrilla trafficker to keep the victim from leaving. And so that's when that violence aspect will come in. All right, so we have familial trafficking, and it happens where you've got mom who traffics her child because she's got a substance abuse problem and she needs money. And those characteristics, which is actually very sad, it's oftentimes that trafficker was or is currently being trafficked themselves. And again, they can be dealing with a substance abuse problem. And their method of control is to threaten to kick that victim out of the home. And oftentimes they convince the victim that this is the only way for survival, to pay rent, utilities, food. And if you consider that there's other kiddos in that house that may be younger than that child who the parent is trafficking, they're going to have that protective aspect of wanting to protect their siblings. And so that's definitely a big one. All right, so our gang traffickers, characteristics, they're often friends or family. They use victims as commodities to be resold. Unlike drugs, where you sell it and it's gone, they use it. While that person can come back for more drugs, that first initial drug is gone. The weapons are sold and they're not going to have those weapons anymore. But a child or a human being is somebody that can be resold over and over again, and there's no end to that. For gang traffickers, loyalty is the most important thing to that gang. Their methods of control, they convince the victim that being trafficked is a way to initiate them into this family. And so if kids don't have that sense of family and that sense of belonging, this is a great way to trick them into thinking that, you know, you're going to be a part of a family and it's going to be a good thing. And with gang traffickers, they often use extreme threats or violence. All right, so some terminology to think about. When we refer to the bottom, that's a female who's appointed by the trafficker or the pimp to supervise the others and report rule violations. And that's also going to be that recruiter. So the bottom is the one who's recruiting those other girls. The Don, aka the buyer or trick, that's the individual who pays for or trades something of value for the sexual act. Kiddie stroll, that's an area known to prostitution that features younger victims. Quota is a set of money that a trafficking victim must make each night before she can come to what's considered home. Renegade, that's a person who's involved in prostitution without a pimp. And oftentimes, like I mentioned earlier, that's the definition, but child sex trafficking, kids are victims. They're not going to be considered prostitutes. A track, aka a stroll or a blade, that's an area in town known for a prostitution activity. And then a big one is the game and the life, and that's what the subculture of prostitution, complete with rules, a hierarchy of authority and language, and that's what it's referred to when kids say I'm in the life, is I am a part of this trafficking world.
So I'm going to review grooming. Many of you, I'm sure, because of the profession you're in, are super familiar with grooming, but I want to touch on it first before we move on to kind of our conversation about like what kids are doing on social media, what they're doing online. Ellie Ness already spoke on really different ways a child can be groomed with a really easy, simple, super real example, quite frankly. So let's look at more of like something that doesn't necessarily happen behind the screen. Okay. So I use this example quite a bit when I'm talking to high school students, but I tell them you can have like kind of anyone in your mind. This is just one example of so many. And we've kind of already talked about the different concepts before we get to grooming. So it's very understood. But targeting a victim, right, could be like, that person that wants to sexually abuse a child, they're going to target a victim. That means they're going to have access to a child. And maybe it's a child, if they have a preference of an age group or a gender, that's who they're going to go after. This is a very tricky process. It's very sneaky. It is, it's not like someone says, hey, guess what? I'm about to groom you, and this is about what's about to happen to you. So it's very hard to see. So we always spend time in the classroom quite a bit kind of talking about this and giving a very real example. So I will do the same tonight. Targeting a victim could look like the abuser, maybe their type is a 15-year-old boy that plays basketball, or right, maybe they have access to a 15-year-old boy that plays basketball. That could be in their profession. It could be someone at the church that's involved with youth. It could be someone that goes down to the park and plays ball in the neighborhood park and knows where the boys are. It could be someone that shows up to the games and watches those boys play games. Targeting a victim, kind of there, right? Gaining trust and information would look like learning everything they could about this child, not just from the child, but also from the caregivers of that child. So it could be on that targeting a victim piece. To back up a little bit, it could be that they are a family member. So maybe they have a 15-year-old nephew. Maybe they are dating someone that has a 15-year-old son. And so again, they have that access piece. And they will use that relationship with that adult to learn what the adult's needs are. What are your needs? What are your child's needs? Guess what? I'm going to fill them, but they're not telling the adult this. They're not telling the adult that the intention's wrong. Instead, it's going to probably be the person that the adult would never think would harm their child. They would not maybe think twice about letting their child spend time with them. This could be a mentor to the child, or again, that family member, which is pretty common what we see. So filling a need could be, if this child has kind of identified that maybe they've moved to a new area or they switched schools and they're really they're struggling with their friend group. They're not really making connections the way they would want to be, or they're not as good on their basketball team that they thought they would be. There's other kids that are kind of like out achieving them on the court. And this person that's wanting to sexually abuse them notices this and kind of uses this piece of information as a way to fill a need. So again, it could be that person that is like more of a mentor figure or a parental figure, or guess what? I'm your friend. You can tell me anything, man. Like, I got you. Like, you can count on me. You ever need anything, I'm here. Gosh, it was like that when I was younger, starting to really kind of tell them a lot of things, trying to solidify some type of bond. Again, this is way before any sexual abuse is even happening. Another thing with boys too, though, since we picked a boy to talk about tonight too, it could be, that they're offering them things that make them feel more grown, right? I'm going to make you feel like you're a grown up. I might give you access to things like I might let you drive my car. I might give you drugs or alcohol. I might even talk to you about like my own experience with sex and dating, because, right? I am relating to you and I'm treating you older than you are. And maybe that makes you feel really grown and that fills the need for a boy. By the way, this could be a woman doing this the whole time. I want you to have that in your mind too. Like, don't have a gender associated in your mind with the person that would be trying to sexually abuse a child. It happens. It's just portrayed a little bit differently in the news. So after that filling a need piece happens, well, I want to back up again. It could be too that that child needs a phone. Their parents are strict. The child was on social media. They don't want them on social media. Get off of that. Guess what? Here, you can have my old iPhone 6. Don't tell your parents. They wouldn't understand. Just keep this between us. So really, anytime an adult is asking a child to keep a secret or a conversation secret, what's the motive there? And teaching children that it's not okay to keep those kinds of secrets, even if it's a good secret. Because having a phone doesn't sound bad. That might sound really good to that teen, but what's the motive there? Why can't the parent know? So really teaching teens to kind of question that. That next step is isolation, right? That could come in place of like, child needs a ride home from basketball practice. Hey, I've got your child, no problem. And it doesn't mean, again, that sexual abuse would start right away, right? But it's that opportunity, it's access and vulnerability. Okay, so that relationship's already built as far as that trust, it's built in, there's a bond there. Child's feeling more grown, now they're isolated. That sexual abuse begins. It can continue. It's usually not that one and done kind of thing. By the time abusers are caught, on average, they've already sexually abused 9 children. So this is not like you're the only one, right? Sometimes we might have, when we think about it, there's a lot of reasons too. We talked about this earlier, that only 1 in 10 kids tell. Think about all the reasons children don't tell. So that first time, right, abuse happens. Why doesn't a child tell? We hear answers from students such as they're afraid. I'm like, you're right. Maybe they feel it's their fault. Yeah, that happens. Maybe they were threatened. Absolutely. Maybe even told, I'm gonna kill your family, right? Like really big things that can be fearful to a child of any age. It could be that the threat was really manipulative. So, hey, if you let me keep doing this to you and you don't tell anyone, I won't do it to your little sister. But then, right, there's an outcry of abuse that happens, or somebody reports suspected abuse of this child. Child comes in for that forensic interview. Sibling is also interviewed. Might just be, right, that younger sibling was being told the same thing by the abuser. If you let me do this to you, let me, right, putting that responsibility on the child. If you let me do this to you and you don't tell, then I won't do it to your older brother. But if you tell, I'm gonna do it to him. So what you start having is like children playing that adult role, taking on that responsibility, that protecting of the family. I don't want to tell. Maybe we hear a lot from students, it's embarrassing. This is one of the biggest things they say. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I don't want anyone to be mad at me. So there's a lot of blame and shame they do, even on themselves. And I really ask the bigger question is, what is society's message to children that this is happening? Right? What's that culture like when we're talking to kids about anything related to the decisions that they make? Grooming, there's not a whole lot of decision making involved. It's such a manipulative process. So even for that 15-year-old boy who might feel like that couldn't happen to me, it can. So all that to be said, prevention is protection. There are many things we can do as educators, as parents and caregivers of people in the life of a child that care about children, that we can do that can really help protect them against child sexual abuse, against re-victimization, right? So it's happened, but they've told. There's a lot of education that can be provided so that we protect them as much as possible, that they have those skills that they can protect themselves as well. And they know how to talk about it if it were to happen again, or if they had that feeling, right, that grooming was taking place. So we know children online are at risk, without a doubt. Some really staggering numbers to think about. In 2020, right, we showed the chart at the beginning where we saw those reports dip, okay, like a valley. Well, guess what? The end of 2020, these reports came in from the cyber tip line, and that is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There's a cyber tip line where reports, right, go to that agency from social media companies like Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, anytime they believe that there is an image of a child online where this child's being exploited. So a nude, a partially nude photograph, any type of child sexual abuse. Also, even parents can report to this, but it's most commonly reported by those popular social media apps. Again, Snapchat, Instagram, there's a lot of reports generated from Facebook. That's very interesting though, right? Because if you're around kids at all, you know they think Facebook is for boomers and y'all are old and we're not. Well, that's really interesting because so many of the reports come from Facebook. So that's kind of something to think about. If there's so many adults on Facebook and then these reports are coming, a lot of them from Facebook, that's just very interesting. I'll let you kind of like think about that a little bit, but different platforms like Snapchat where it's children sending nudes to each other, obviously that makes sense in my mind totally, where those reports would come from that. But Facebook, that's maybe not peer-to-peer sending photographs, okay? But 21.7 million plus reports made to the cyber tip line in 2020. That's a ton of reports. A ton. I know one year, it was in 2019 when I was teaching at a school. That week alone, it was over 200,000 images were reported. It was just some random week in 2019. And I happened to look it up. And so I share that with students, like 200,000 images of children online at risk, right? Like this was reported. Thank goodness it's reported, but really, like, let's let that sink in, that's definitely children online are at risk. Cannot deny that. Also, children online, though, use social media for a lot of different things. So the message never to students is social media is bad and it's just so terrible for you. That message doesn't really get very far with children at all. They kind of stop listening to anything else that you are presenting or have to say and kind of disengage. It feels very judgy, and I understand that. I want them to always leave a presentation feeling safer about things that they can do versus like I'm talking like down to you. Adults use social media for connections too. So a little bit about the sign of the times. So we are here, right? Technology is here. I think it's here to stay. More than half of US children own a smartphone by age 11. They own it. They have it. That could be a parent's old phone, right? Regardless, it's a smartphone. We can start thinking about access to everything at their fingertips. Some of them, it may be on Wi-Fi. Some of them, they may have an actual phone number associated to that. We know 93% of children have internet access even in the home, and that's children 3 and up. So 3 through 18 years old, right? They have home internet access, and we know the internet access is in the school. Of course, there's lots of different, safety measures there. You get into the high schools, they all have VPN apps. They're so smart. They know how to kind of like bypass everything. So a third of children ages 7 to 9 use social media apps. When I do our kids safety presentation here from our agency, when I show some of the social media apps on the screen, the children scream. This is 3rd grade. They scream. It is the most exciting thing, actually, and it totally happened by accident. I didn't know the children would scream. They scream in the gym or they scream in the library, but we let them scream like they're screaming. They're excited to see that up on the screen. Then we switch over to the gaming apps, and it gets even louder. The teachers laugh, the counselors laugh, and then we can say, okay, yes, we all know you have social media and you have gaming apps. It's obviously something that they are on and they're using. Again, thinking about in what ways they're using those and kind of who they're befriending online. 40% of teens agree that it's normal to share nudes with each other. The other way to look at that, though, is that 60% of teens agree that it's not normal. Like, they're not saying that, but 40% are agreeing it's kind of normal to share them with one another. That does not mean that they think it's okay to share with people that are older, right? Like those adults maybe, but with their peers, yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. The average age of first exposure to pornography is now around 11 years of age. So that's interesting. More than half of US children own a smartphone by age 11. Also, the average age of first exposure to pornography is now 11 years old. Who knows if those are related? But again, there's a lot going on for that 5th, 6th grader. A lot. Not to mention they're going through puberty. There's a lot of changes happening to their bodies, to their brain. What's going on here? They're in middle school. You can think when we talk about grooming, a lot of those vulnerabilities kind of at play around this age. So if you would for a minute, I don't have access to the chat. Like, I don't see it on my screen, and I'm not going to mess with anything because I don't want to ruin anything technology wise. But if anyone else can see it and they want to unmute and tell me some of the answers to the questions I'm about to ask, I would love to kind of like hear them read off. So let's go on a journey. Tonight, it's dark outside, I can see it. But I want you to think about, right, maybe a teen, and they are going to get on the train in Denton, and they're going to go to downtown Dallas for the day, right? So they have to switch from the A train, the DCTA, they have to switch over to the DART rail system, but they got to go downtown for whatever reason. Again, we're kind of make-believing tonight. It's okay. We can be the kids tonight, right? I want you to think about all the things a teen would need to be successful on that trip, right? It could be a young teen, 13, 14 years old. It can be really a child of any age if you'd like to do that. But think about everything they would need even before they get on that first train. What do they need to make a successful journey from point A to point B and then back? Because they have to transfer trains actually in Carrollton. It's not just a straight shot. So if anyone can see the chat and read it off, I want to know what you think. If that's too much for your mind, think of a younger child. If you teach younger children, or if you have younger children, say they're going to the grocery store. I want you to think of maybe they just want to pack of Skittles. What kind of things do they need to be successful to make it down to the store, wherever that is, and to make it back home safely? So Let me know if you can see the chat. Oh, directions for the train. I can see it. Look at that. Oh, technology is cooperating.
Money and smartphone.
Yep. Debit card. Oh, debit card. Yes, some teens do have debit cards. I love that. Money, directions, a ticket. Yeah, they needed train schedules. Oh my gosh, y'all. I got lost as a teenager in Dallas so many times on the train and the bus system. And I missed my bus so many times too. It was terrible. But yes, they need that schedule, right? Somebody said a smartphone. Tell me why they need a smartphone. Pop in the chat why a child or a teen might need a smartphone. Somebody said maze to get the schedule for the train. Yeah, absolutely. 2 responsible companions. I really like that, right? You go in a group because it's safer, so I can stalk my child. Yes, every parent's dream, right? Like, where are you? That location being shared probably. To get any and all, I missed that last part. Yeah, a smartphone. I like seeing that internet use, right? What if an emergency happens? I don't know if I missed it, but maybe, right? To be able to contact an emergency contact, know the train to transfer to. It can be confusing. Y'all are probably like, why is she talking about trains tonight? A phone charger, yes. So your phone does not die. Oh my gosh, teens are notorious for that too. Smartphone without tracking device software, phone to check. These are all fantastic. They're super good. Trying to see something maybe I haven't seen yet. Okay. I got lost too. I know it's scary. I remember being that age and it got dark too. To call 911 in an emergency. Yeah, very good. Yeah, call an emergency. Those are great answers. I appreciate all of y'all. So why did I take you on a journey on a train station to another one, right? Because I want you to think of the internet, really, social media as a place a child is going to. Okay. It's like a destination. It's not just like a child behind a screen and right there in their room, they're at home. No, they're actually going somewhere. They are going somewhere, and there's going to be all sorts of things they run into. There's going to be maybe a schedule change. Somebody mentioned that, and I saw that quite a bit of times. It could be that they lose something, they need an emergency, like they need to make a call, they fall. If anyone's ever fallen off of the train or just on concrete, right? Okay, I'm done for the day. Like, I'm done with this trip. I've already missed my train, everything like that. That can happen online too, y'all. Online, a child can be online and they encounter something they did not prepare to encounter. They feel stuck. They don't know what to do. Who do they call on for help, right? Who are those emergency contacts? Who can they talk to safely and get help for what just happened? Someone just sent them a nude. What do I do with this? I didn't see it in the chat, but I did kind of see the chat a little bit late. I don't know if anyone mentioned maybe a practice run through before they ever went down there for their destination. That came up last training, and I really liked it. Right? If you have that practice run through, kind of tell them some of the scenarios that could come up, or actually take them through it themselves of like, this could happen or this could happen. And then what would you do? That can be really helpful too. Even if you can't physically, right, get on the train, you don't want to physically put them in harm's way going on a social media app. Hey, let's do this to teach you a lesson. But just letting them know that it can happen, and then kind of what they're next to do is, oftentimes, let's be real, parents, teachers, schools, we learn through mistakes. Mistakes happen. It's a great learning opportunity. And when a child has an opportunity to kind of restore that mistake, restorative practice there, that can be really beneficial from them. There can be a lot of learning and a lot of safety that's involved there. So I just wanted to take you through that. It's important. Technology plays a role. It plays a role in these crimes, and big time. Screen time among teenagers doubled from pre-pandemic estimates of 3.8 hours per day to 7.7 hours. These are hours that are not on Chromebooks, okay? Like, I'm not talking about their schoolwork and they're doing it that way. I'm talking about the hours outside of, not outside of school time necessarily, because you can be on a Chromebook and be on a cell phone. And I know not all of us are on camera tonight. People do that. Like, you kind of double, you're doing two things at once. You're not really fully present in either. It happens, right? But we know teens are up quite a bit. They're doing this, they're online. Kind of the message of get offline. doesn't work too well when talking to an audience really of tweens or teens. And like I said, those younger children, telling them not to game and things like that. Sometimes that message is not received well. More importantly, I don't think it's protective. I don't think it's protective. When instead we can give them tools to be safer while online, there's protection there. So online grooming, right? Predators have access. So we talked about grooming kind of outside of that screen. But this is what grooming might look like online, right? Alina's covered that great example earlier, trafficking. This is more generalized of maybe some of these different ways that people will groom children online. So somebody could be trolling social media apps for potential victims, join those online gaming servers, game with children for many months before they ever speak to them inappropriately, or maybe they don't ever speak to them inappropriately because, right, they jump all the way down to that last one, which is ask the youth to meet up face to face, but they never say anything about, they never give an indication maybe that they are up to no good. They will gain any identifiable information, establish contacts and messages. So this too is if children have, right, they've been taught, keep my profile private. Because parents, teachers, it's been said in school a ton. So they're like, you know what, I don't want people in my business anyway. I'm going to keep it private. Awesome. That's a great first step. But then in their bio, it might have something super simple like the initials of their high school and the year that they're going to graduate. Someone can do simple math. If they're looking for a certain age of a child that they're going after, they want that freshman, they can look at that year. They can start DMing this child, sending them messages. They can start trying to game. They can do anything like that. So sometimes it's that smallest bit of information. They play on that vulnerability, okay? Use multiple platforms and profiles to speak with youth. So talking to them, trying to communicate with them in a variety of ways. It's not just a kind of, I'm just going to talk to you on this app. No, over time, it'll be, they're all up in their business. It's like too much. It can become very smothering, but to a child, maybe it doesn't feel smothering either if that was a need that a child has. If they're needing that love and attention and affirmation that maybe they're not getting, and this is filling a need because maybe the person looked all over their profile because their profile is actually public. The person's looking at the songs they listen to, their playlist, they're looking at everything they post, they're liking everything. It's a lot of dopamine kind of happening every time that heart is kind of happening online, right? There's some validation there that happens. Speaking to a child, a youth at all hours of the night or as much as possible. So let's use the chat again. It'll be a little bit of fun. I did this last time, so if it's a repeat, I'm sorry, but it'll be fun. Okay, tell me if you're cool with a stranger being in your child's room all night. Yes or no? I only want yes or no answers. No, all caps. No, it's like it's rapid fire on the screen. Like, no way. You're crazy, lady. It didn't say that, but no, absolutely not, right? Okay, fair enough. That was a crazy question, right? Okay, so how about, it's just still coming across. I'm like, no. How about, are you cool with like maybe a family member being in your child's room all night? Are y'all good with that? Not all night. Somebody said yes. No. Maybe cousin his age. Yeah. So maybe a child their own age. Yeah. Depends on the situation. Yeah, I agree. Right. Like, hey, we're going to talk about that more. Maybe I need more information to answer this question. Right. I get it. No, that's very good. I'm looking at the chat. Depends on the circumstances. There's no reason for it, really. Yeah, I agree. Right. Like, I didn't even bring up the door closed, door open thing, but maybe that makes a difference, right? If the door is open, we cool with that? I mean, maybe like sleepover is a good safety thing. Keep that door open. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that was fun little participation there. So if a child is in the room at night, right? Door shut or doors open, but they have a phone. It's in their room. Plugged in, right? It's charging. My alarm's on it. I know your alarm's on it. There's no restrictions on the phone whatsoever. That phone is open completely. That means a child can be on apps all night. They can talk to whoever they want. By the way, like they can have any kind of social media app. Nobody knows what they're on. Nobody's asking those kinds of questions. Nobody's checking the phone. Nobody has to approve the apps that they have. There's no age restrictions on them. So by the way, they can be viewing porn all night. Nobody knows. Nobody knows because maybe no one's asking. Hey, technology is difficult to figure out too. And I'm not being cynical. I'm being really real. It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff for an adult to kind of be like, what are you on? That's probably one of the safest things, though, that a parent can do is just keep that phone outside of their room if there's no restrictions on it, or just put those restrictions on it. The alarm goes off, right? But there's that downtime on that app. That means they can't get on that app after, say, 10 o'clock, whatever it is, right? That kind of ensures a couple things. Parent can sleep soundly, knowing that that child cannot get in that app or they don't have access to any of that kind of stuff. Maybe there's also restrictions on it for age appropriate content. So they can't get on those sites because it blocks them. Sometimes kids get so mad at this because it'll block the most like random stuff that's actually kind of age appropriate, but it's like just an extra filter and it blocks it. But it also ensures, right, the child gets sleep, hopefully, right? They're sleeping. They're not on that screen all night kind of looking at that. Without those restrictions, without knowledge of like that parental figure knowing kind of what the child's doing on their phone, that phone's in their room all night. Ellie Ness gave a great example earlier, right? Parents are cooking dinner, child's on it. Okay, yeah, that can happen too, just like that. Would say when that child's in that room alone at night, though, think again about that vulnerability piece. With grooming, you have to have access and vulnerability. Access is there. Access is there. If they're in their room, there's zero restrictions. It's a free-for-all. And it's also really overwhelming for a child's mind too, if they've never been talked to about these dangers. And now guess what? This is happening. Guys, we see this with very young children. I'm talking elementary school. I'm talking lower grades. It happens and it's really scary. We have to talk to them young. It really does protect them. So I went to say all of that just to know that like this does happen. It's done sneaky again, that grooming that's done online. Even if they're not talking to a child sexually, they might start sending that child sexual images of themselves. So guess what? A young child or teen gets a picture they didn't ask for. What do I do with this? Oh my gosh, I wasn't supposed to have Snapchat. I'm not supposed to have Snapchat. I'm not supposed to be friends with someone I don't know. So there are So I always say teach children that they can absolutely go to you even if they've broken a rule. Even if they've broken a rule, to be able to come to you if they feel unsafe. That's kind of like that get out. Yes, we'll talk about that later, that you broke that rule. That'll come up. But when it comes to your safety, you come talk to me about anything. It's kind of like the idea if a teen goes to a party, they get intoxicated, they're drunk, they're high, something's going on, have that emergency contact of that parent that you call so you don't get behind the wheel. Right? This is the same thing. If that child's unsafe, they have to be able to go to a safe adult. They feel like they have no safe adults to go to. Guess what? That person that's likely grooming them, hey, I'm that person you can talk to. You can keep coming back to me. So self-generated child sexual abuse material, otherwise known as nudes, we know teens are absolutely sending them. Again, this is a bit normalized. 40% agreed it's normal for people their own age to share those with each other. 1 in 5 girls ages 13 to 17 agreed that they've shared their own nudes. 1 in 5. 1 in 10 for boys of that same age range. 21% of kids say they've seen someone else's nudes. So they maybe didn't ask for it. They maybe didn't want it. But guess what? It showed up on their phone or on their friend's device and their friend showed them. And again, think about that 11-year-old exposed to pornography, didn't know what they were looking at, didn't know this word, what porn was, and now they've seen it, and literally those effects on the brain. There's just so much that child might be processing. They might not even have the words to articulate what they just saw, or what someone showed them, or what someone is asking them to do if they've never had conversations with safe people about what to do if they encounter something like this. We know without a doubt there are people online that are aiming to exploit children. They want to engage in sexual activity with children. These are just some examples of local sting operations within Denton County. These are like 2019, I think early 2020, but you can see it's multiple instances. These are all over the place, okay? Collin County had one a few months back. Fort Worth had great big sting operations of these. They're all over the nation. If any of you are a little bit older like myself, you remember the show To Catch a Predator. It's very similar like this. It's fake profiles are created of teens, so 12 to 15-year-olds, right? Just young teens. And then those profiles are generated. They look very real. Again, technology is amazing. So FBI gets involved, Homeland Security. They're all part of this sting operation. Local law enforcement agencies. Again, these were within Denton. And what you see, what we saw, and what y'all should have seen, this was all over Facebook, all over the news stations, is that multiple people were arrested for trying to engage in sexual activity with children. At least the intent was there, at least typing, right? We don't know if that act would have actually gone through, but at least in text, it was stated that they wanted to engage in sex with children. Very graphic chats about what they wanted to do. And more, each time this sting operation happened, more and more people were arrested. So I show this in the middle schools and high schools, and we talk about it, right? Yes, it's men in these photographs, but women can be arrested in these sting operations too. It's usually far and few between, but it does happen. But for whatever reason, when it's online sting operations, it happens to be more, way more men, heavily dominated by that. But there was a teacher arrested, coach, a youth pastor. There were dads arrested, and there was a law enforcement officer arrested. He had come over from a different county. He wanted to engage with sex with a 15-year-old boy. Right? It's not the people you might think that were doing this. Some of these people were married, some were single, some made money, some really didn't make money, or maybe were unemployed. Someone drove all the way from Houston to try to have sex with who they thought was a child in Denton County. Thank goodness, no children were harmed in the sting operation. They did not meet up with children. They met up with law enforcement. They were arrested. This middle sting operation, a 5-year-old victim was rescued. So thank goodness, right? That child was being sexually abused in the home. Because of the sting operation, we don't know, right? If that child would have ever told, or if anyone would have noticed those signs of abuse. So what can we do? There's a lot of things we can do. First, you can model healthy online behavior yourself, right? I have this picture of Tinder here, y'all. Teens are on Tinder. Let's just understand that. We see that. There's also other social media apps that are more marketed towards kids. It's more like a friend finding app or a meetup app, but it's kind of very similar by design as like a Tinder or a dating app where you swipe right, swipe left. It's location based. So literally you can see if someone's like a mile from you. And so be aware of that. I put that there because, right, sometimes social learning theory, right? Monkey see, monkey do. What are we doing? Are kids following that? How does that kind of look? What does your social media look like? What are the things you kind of post? What's the kind of language you put out there? What are the things you share? And do they see that? Guess what? Kids Google adults. They love it. It's hilarious. They make fun of you all day. Right? It's a thing. It actually happens. Whoa. And not just maybe the adult that they know, like the own adults in their life, parent or caregiver, but also the adults of like their friends. So there's just a lot sometimes on there. And the kids also stalk the parents' social media, by the way, and that can just be kind of funny when they share those stories. But who are your social connections? Are you friends with people that you know? Do they have access to see everything? Or is it sometimes they're just on that kind of close friends list, if you know them in real life and you trust them? Or can they see everything? Is it public? Everyone can see everything. What do you share online again? And then why do you share it? What's the motivation behind that? Are you having conversations with your children about that, about why you shared that? Especially if it's something that totally is different than how that child feels. Is that child supported, or are they seeing a post on the adult social media that's completely contradictory to how they feel about something? I hear that a lot in schools. How do you think you're perceived online? Again, so how do you think you're perceived by your child? What are those things you can do to help them know that they can trust you and that you support them? Again, especially when it comes to safety. There's some boundaries to kind of put in place and provide them reasonably, right? It's kind of easy to be in that all or nothing mindset, but that's not too effective with kids. But try to learn some of the apps that they're on, especially with young children. I strongly encourage kind of those monitoring apps. And so you can like kind of get a view of who that app is for, if it's totally outside their age restriction, what it is. There's thousands of apps. I would never expect a parent to have all the time in the world on top of everything else and loving and supporting their children to know all these apps. Just kind of learn some of the ones that they're on, talk to them about it. Be aware of those privacy settings. Usually children are really good about actually teaching the adults in their home on how to set those privacy settings. Have your child set those accounts on private. They should only be friends with people that they know in real life. Teach them about potential dangers. Guess what? It's real. It does happen. They will be encountered, or they'll be reached out to. They'll be talked to crazy about different things and asked the most non-age appropriate questions online. Have technology visible in common areas. Again, I talked about that, like even that nighttime, just taking that phone out of the room, having that plugged in somewhere else. Younger children, having them on like iPads only outside of the room or just where you can see it. Encourage those face-to-face interactions with friends. That's going to be really good for overall mental health too. But keep in mind, they do keep those connections online with each other too. That was sometimes the only way they were communicating with friends over the pandemic. So that can be really important. I know the phone's usually taken away in a grounding instance. I would say if a child makes a mistake on a phone, give them another opportunity to kind of learn that safety piece of it. Be the example, right? They imitate what they see, set limits. Again, we talked about those quite a bit. We have some resources that are professional. They're for children, parents, and caregivers, and of course, Spanish resources. Spanish resources are usually pretty easy to get. You just go to the different sources that like websites and things like that, and you toggle the top of the screen and you switch it from English language to Spanish language. And it depends on, there's many different translations. So it's not just English, Spanish, but I like to put Spanish on here because that's sometimes what we're asked for quite a bit. So just know you can toggle that screen. So this is a great activity I want y'all to have. It's so fun, and I will breeze through it so we can have questions at the end. But this is a Paper Twitter builds SEL skills, social emotional learning, y'all. It's where it's at, right? So these are kind of the instructions, and I'll show you the example. So a teacher or caregiver shares an open-ended question or prompt, right? It's going to be a paper Twitter. Teacher's going to share an open-ended prompt. If I could be a wizard, I would, and then the child fills out that prompt. All students tweet a response to that. Students respond to the peers they're following. So before this kind of happens, children create profiles. This is really good for middle school, maybe early high school, but middle school, this goes over very well, I assure you. Children can also respond to anyone else in class, so not just the people they're following. Students make connections with hearts, right? So they draw the heart. It's like a little art built-in lesson too, because it's pretty cool, these profiles they make. And then teacher reads a selection of tweets aloud to the class after it's all said and done. teacher also participates. So this is cool to see students kind of walk around the class. They kind of also see what their teachers are up to. So this is kind of like the template for it. This is by Edutopia. It's the George Lucas Foundation. The lesson plan's online. It's super awesome. You can just kind of do it like this. So students will draw a picture right under that first bird. They do their username, a little bit about their bio, and then the people that they're following. And it looks a little bit like this at the end of the day. And this is really fun because what you end up having are tons of bios, and then you have lots of tweets and responses to tweets. But then when that class is over, of course, a new class comes in, they do their own paper Twitter, but then they start responding to other students in class. Now, of course, you have rules in the beginning, right? We're going to stick together, no hurts, have fun. If you're familiar with TBRI, hey, we are doing that. There's going to be no hate speech. Like, this is not okay. And if that happens, you redirect, you bring them back on course, but you can see a lot of these have hearts, hearts, hearts. So these are real responses. I love some of them, and they're really telling of what kids were going through mid-pandemic. So if animals could talk, I would ask them, how's life? A kid said, sheesh, I don't know. Like, what are you asking, lady? Like, I don't know what I would do to this. If I could become invisible, I would rob a bank. Hashtag moolah. Yes, probably every child's like idea. If I could get on a plane, I would go to Montana to live with my dad. If I had to learn a new skill, I'd like to learn to play mind games with my mom so I can do the things I want. And then they did a tongue out emoji. Just funny. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. If I could change the school, I would change my teacher's attitude. Okay. Yeah, those are real feelings there. If I ran the school, I would change the mask rules. Yeah, definitely. Students were feeling that quite a bit when we were doing this activity. So that one got a lot of hearts for sure. My best day ever would be going on vacation with my family and best friends. So again, just making those connections, keeping those connections. Again, this is a really beautiful activity. Teachers reported like, right, they got to know their students more, but also it was the other way around. Students got to see, hey, like, this person's human. Like, I didn't know you liked that, coach. Like, it was a great activity. Other things online, some great resources for professionals, and I will say parents as well, is consent parenting. It's amazing. It's for all different kinds of learners. So if you like podcasts, plenty of those, all on safety, internet, body safety, child sexual abuse prevention. There's Common Sense Education, which has pre-K through 12 lesson plans on internet safety, body safety. This is incredible. It's already laid out for you. It's done. Then, of course, NetSmart by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Wonderful reputation. They've been doing this for a long time. They know what they're doing. This is an example of kind of an age-appropriate lesson for younger kids, right? Sometimes I talk to people on the computer. They're my internet friends. I see some internet friends when I'm not on the computer. Here's the list of internet friends that I talk to even when I'm not on the computer. So an example is my mom. I talk to my mom, right? Where do I see her? At home, in the car, etc. Then you move down. I have other internet friends that I've never seen face-to-face. I only talk to them on the computer. Here's a list of internet friends that I only talk to on the computer. Tiger27, I play with them on Club Penguin, or maybe somebody, a username, they play on Roblox. Some of my internet friends are nice. They may ask me to meet with them face-to-face. If an internet friend asks to meet me, I should tell my mom or dad or other trusted adult. So this is a really great lesson. It does a couple things, right? It lets that adult know here are those internet friends that they've been talking to, and here are the platforms they've been talking to. But it also reassures that child, right? I will not meet face-to-face with anyone from the internet. So again, this is for younger children, but it's a good safety lesson there. Ellie Ness, you want to talk on this resource? This is a great one.
Yep, this is from Project Starfish. It's actually a certification that teachers can go through to be able to also educate other teachers on human trafficking. So this resource is going to give you the definition of human trafficking, what those risk factors are, those vulnerabilities we talked about, and how to prepare yourself to have those conversations with those kiddos when you have those suspicions. So yeah.
You said that's Project Starfish?
Yep, Project Starfish.
Perfect, perfect. So yeah, that sounds like an incredible resource, specifically if you're interested in teaching that content in human trafficking. So we have programs at our center that are free. We go into LISD schools all the time. We go actually all over North Texas. I would say some of the best ones, right, for the younger children are PS, It's My Body, Happy Bear. It's an interactive play. I've seen some names pop up tonight. We've been to your school. Thank you for having us. The kids really do enjoy it. It's age appropriate for those littles, pre-K through second grade. Then we move into kid safety that starts teaching those online safety concepts, and then also the differences between secrets and surprises. Oh, we loved Happy Bear. Thank you. We loved being there. Yes. So just kind of teaching those safety concepts and then how to report to a safe adult. That's part of every single presentation. I will say, I have it kind of bolded down here. Sexual assault, what you need to know, is our new high school program. It addresses what sexual assault is, what you need to know, the difference between sexual assault, sexual harassment. And then it's reporting practices, so best practices if that assault has happened. And we give students a variety of ways to report that, including there's reporting procedures. We specify it to each individual school. So we work with that school to let us know that. It is wonderful. Please have us to your school. And then here you go.
All right. So, victims, human trafficking victims, especially children, often don't self-identify or disclose. And trauma often masks their victimization. And so, a study of exploited youth being in 10 different nonprofits serving CST victims, which are child sex trafficking victims, found that 75% of exploitation was ongoing for 2 years or more. 75% don't see themselves as being exploited, and 50% of those kiddos were 14 or younger when the exploitation started. Um, and so something that I want to point out that's super important is that, again, those victims don't self-identify or disclose. And so typically when you have those suspicions and you talk to those kids, off the back, they're not going to talk to you about what's going on. And that can be for multiple reasons, but one of them being that they think that they're the ones who are doing this and they're okay with it. And again, that comes from that grooming aspect and, that codependency that trafficker has put. And it can also be because maybe that kid needs what they're getting from that lifestyle. And so, again, they're really not going to self-identify. So we have an awesome tool that we actually use, and it's called the Commercial Sexual Exploitation Tool. Do you want to? There you go. All right. And so this helps us with early identification of children who are commercially sexually exploited. And this protects youth from prolonged abuse, exploitation, because it's recognized early. And so some of the things that we look at are their housing and caregiving, any prior abuse or trauma, physical health and appearance, their environment of exposure, their relationships and personal belongings, signs of current trauma, coercion, and exploitation. And so in that tool, they're going to fall in a continuum of either no concern, which is a 0 to 3 score, a possible concern, which is 4 to 8, which is, we're kind of concerned, but really there's probably not anything going on just yet. And then a clear concern where it's like there's really those risk factors there that make this kid more likely to be sex trafficked or is already being sex trafficked. Something to keep in mind, just because a child does fall on that clear concern doesn't mean that they're being sex trafficked. It just means that they're at high risk for it. And so here at our center, with this role of high risk youth coordinator, we're able to put prevention measures in place and wraparound services for those kiddos. So it doesn't get to that trafficking aspect. And so they have the tools necessary to be able to kind of see that early on. So this is a great tool. I know teachers use it as well. So this is definitely a training that you can also go to. Again, because kids are not going to self-identify, this tool is going to be really helpful for you to kind of key into those indicators. And so that's a training that you can do through Lighthouse. Reminder that child sex trafficking is child abuse. And so as mandated and professional reporters, make sure that you are making those reports to the Texas Abuse Hotline, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, or law enforcement. All right, so if you have any questions, please drop them in the box and we'll be happy to answer.
I know somebody has a question. Like, it's impossible. I know it's late, but I promised we would get out early, and it's only 7:37. Somebody must have a question about everything we just covered. It can be anything. Maybe you've just really wondered about something and just pop it in and we can talk about it. Somebody gave a thumbs down. I don't know what that means. Maybe they're like, no question, it's time to go. Be nice. If I want my sons to see these for their, hold on, what just happened there?
I want my sons to see these for their children. Where can we watch it?
Oh, like your older sons. I think it will be posted on YouTube, if I remember right, from the last time we did the whole child series. So I think the district will get that out to you. I think I've Googled it once before too, when I sent on a training. So how long does that? That's a great question. How long is the average grooming period? Ness, with all your expertise, you want to give a shot at that one?
I mean, it can be instant.
Yeah.
It could be a very long time. And again, like you mentioned, that grooming can start with the parent, right? It's a single mom who needs help. And so the grooming starts with the mom and then it goes towards the child. And so really it's going to depend on that perpetrator.
Yeah, I know the online sting operations, some of those people, it was like within an hour, they were already working on the cycle of grooming and asking a child to meet up within an hour, describing all the sexual acts they wanted to do with them. Others, it was like a few days. Again, this was like an online format, so that looked different. But yeah, it can really vary. I was at a training once. It was probably the most disturbing thing I heard, but I'm gonna share it with you because it was actually very good. It was if somebody wants to groom, right, a 12, 13-year-old girl, hey, they might get with a mom, a single mom of an 8-year-old daughter. So they have all that time, those 3, 4 years to kind of build up that grooming, build that trust before they even sexually abuse that child. So something to keep in mind. Again, a very patient process. That's a great question. I saw some others.
Yep, there's if you wanted to get involved to help kids, what could you do?
We have wonderful volunteer opportunities. I will never discourage that. Those volunteer opportunities are more like behind the scenes. You would never interact with a child at our center that comes into our center, but you'd be doing a lot of things that like were supportive for different things to be in place for that child. So yeah, connect with us if you're interested in that. But there's a lot of things. I mean, even being here tonight, you're really helping to benefit a child. There's a lot of research that indicates for every 1 adult trained in child abuse, 10 children are better protected. So just by being here, staying on this call, like you're doing a lot.
All right, so there was another one that says, what is a good app that blocks pornography?
I think if you have an iPhone or any kind of phone, I think a good thing to do is just to kind of a first step is just to go in and change those age settings under restrictions that you can kind of filter out a whole lot of material with that. And then there's monitoring apps. There's a whole ton. I don't really list one. I mean, there's so many. I know Life 360 is really popular, Bark. There's several that you can do, but they might be giving you literally like a warning on everything. So say like your child like falls down and they take a picture of their boo-boo on their knee because they're a young child and this app is on their phone. You might get a warning of like a safety concern or something like that. And that can kind of get old with an older child of like, Mom, I'm fine. Like I took a picture of my knee and sent it to my friend.
Let's see. How can I approach a child to ask if they're in the trafficking life? Um, Typically that's not because kids are not going to self-disclose. Um, we don't really want to go out and ask, are you being trafficked? Most of the times they're not going to be upfront with you. And so if you do have suspicions, and also we want to kind of minimize like how many people are talking to this child about the trafficking, right? Because when it comes to the investigation piece, that really can muddy waters. And so the best thing you can do is just assure kids that you're a support system and make that report and to your law enforcement agencies, and to Child Protective Services. Seatbelts. Will more laws be passed to combat child trafficking? So the governor's initiative to combat human trafficking in general started back in 2017, and so that initiative has gone into those bigger state counties in the state of Texas, like Houston and Dallas and Tarrant County and Bow County. In 2019 is when we kicked off in here in Denton County, and so more counties are coming on to show that human trafficking is real, it's happening, and so we hope that as that continues, more laws will be passed to combat that. But it's really getting those law enforcement agencies also on board, and Child Protective Services on board to serve those kiddos and work those cases. So if there is a suspicion of trafficking, how do we go about reporting this issue? Is it the same process as reporting child abuse? Yep. So you'd call that hotline or your law enforcement agencies to report that suspicion. Love those resources shared. I don't have a question, but I really thought this was very educational in a sad way, but it very much needed. Thank you for all you do for so many children.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for being here.
Mhm.
Thank you for what you do. You're interfacing every single day.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a recommended kids phone parental control app or for iPhones?
Will you say that again?
Yes. Do you have recommended kids phone parental control app for iPhones?
Not recommended. Okay, let me give you, I like this question. I will tell you, one thing I've encountered a lot in schools is kind of when a child knows there's a parental app on that phone, they will just use a different phone. They will use, and Ellie Ness is shaking her head, yes, because we see this a lot. They'll use a different phone to log into their Snapchat, either from a friend or like somebody had an old, I mentioned the iPhone 6, because for whatever reason we see that a lot, right? Somebody has an old iPhone in their parents, closet, they take that out, it's unlocked, they give it to their friend, or they're using a friend's phone. Quite a bit like that. There was also, kids are really smart, and if they know that their location's being shared, every single text message is being seen by the parent, they find a way around it, especially with teens. They feel like they don't have any autonomy, right? I mean, I hear you. Like, I empathize with them. One thing I've definitely seen, heard from a counselor at a large school district, is that a student actually had like a great little business idea. They're little entrepreneurs, y'all, right? This student would just go ahead and go to the library every day after school, had like the passwords to the couple different phones of other children, would open these phones and just kind of it's almost like a little system, knew what to do on these phones so that the parents thought, my child's in the library studying after school. Guess what? The child's not. Only the one child is there kind of managing those phones while a kid's off, several kids are off, doing whatever they're doing, but maybe they're not ever having a conversation about that with their parents. Because, right, the parents like, I'm monitoring every little thing on your phone. So sometimes that can be tough. Younger children, I do encourage it though. Again, those parental controls, there's so many. Usually the ones coming home from the school though too, there'll be like flyers and stuff like that. Maybe that districts are sending out. I would recommend those.
All right. If a parent uncovers a sex trafficker, how do they disclose it or approach it? Again, I would definitely go to law enforcement with that suspicion or that knowledge and allow them to handle those situations for your safety and the safety of others as well. Let's see. Do you run into cases where the person giving attention starts out with good intentions and motives and then falls into having different motives? No, I mean, no, these people, perpetrators in general, know what they're doing, and they start off with the intention of harming a child. And so I don't think I've ever seen a case where somebody had those good intentions and it turned into something different. It was that was the intention from the very beginning. If we find out that not only the child but also the mother is being trafficked, do you have resources for women that are being abused? So we don't work with adults, trafficked adults, but we do have a lot of partnering agencies that will, and so I'm sure we could share those as well. I think that's it, Yamuna.
Okay, awesome. Well, that was perfect timing because my internet froze up for a minute and I was like, wait a minute. So these are our sources. Oh, thank y'all so much. We will be sure to send these out. This is our contact information. If you want to send us a personal email or give us a call, just chat on the phone. If you are interested in education at your campus or at your community group, at your church, please reach out. All these trainings are free. I promise they're age appropriate. Kids respond so well. They are just the most fun thing to do. I love it. So thank you all so much. That's all we got. I will stick around for a minute in case anyone wants to kind of hang around. But thank you all so much for being here tonight.